She is a design lead, product designer, and strategist with a touch of pragmatism, an occasional knitter, and a karaoke enthusiast. She believes in the power of radical collaboration to bridge the gap between business strategy and experience design geared towards creating services that people enjoy. With over 10 years of user experience and product innovation, she leads design teams through data-driven environments, always holding the user's needs as their main priority. So I'm super excited to introduce Andrea, and I'm gonna actually give it over to her.
Yes, hi everybody. Super happy to be here. Let me just share my screen already. And yeah, so nice to meet you all. My name is Andrea. I'm UX lead at Marley Spoon, and for the last year, one of my priorities has been to design the product and research teams within the digital department. It's almost 1 year since we started with that project, so bear with me, it's a work in progress. But yeah, I've been quite lucky that for the past years, I've worked in design agencies. I've also worked as a freelancer and of course in different startups. And there is always one particular thing that surprises me in this environment. And that basically is that once a company starts, especially in the startup world, there is a point where they create this whole strategy. They start building this MVP, and at some point they hit a blocker, and that's when they realize, like, damn, we need a designer. And that's actually when here comes the UX designer, or whatever fancy title we want to name it. And this is an amazing person that, to be honest, we all heard about it, how design can increase revenue, how design actually can increase conversion rates, how design is going to save the world from all the business people thinking, because we can do it all. We can do research. We're experts on usability. We can uncover those unmet needs, and we're there for it. We are also amazing at UI because, you know, we can see patterns, and it's so simple for us to notice an interface and say, like, I know how to do it. Add the sticky button here, over here, the flow, all good, perfection. We also think about the strategy, you know, like all these tech people, all these product people, they don't see the long-term vision. We're just making few calls here and there and hope that it will make sense later. So that's why we're here, to bring the strategy to these teams that they really need it. And of course, the most important one, and one of the reasons why we're so proud that we are designers, is we're bringing the customer closer to the company. We bring those insights to them. We're that connection point for the company to, I mean, we talk to so many of them. And that's why we're here. We're the designers. We're ready to save the world and change the way that the company is doing business. And reality is that, yes, everyone should be doing research. Everybody in the product team. We should take a look at having actually time to talk to the customers, bridging that gap, because at the end of the day, that's also why we're here and what we're proud of. But reality is that research needs time. And most of the times we don't have time, because reality is that most of us work on agile. And like it or not, and I truly enjoy working in agile. I truly enjoy working with the developers, but the 2-week sprint makes it hard for any kind of research to actually have a big impact, to actually add any value to any kind of stream work that we have in a product company. And that's a fact that we need to consider. Another thing that I actually realized while working in different companies is the ratio of the teams. We have big tech teams, and that's also understandable. The company wants to grow, the company wants to build more, and usually we we link this feeling of, hey, more sales, more users means building more features, which means hiring more tech people, which means hiring more business people to do business development, which means also hiring more product managers or product owners, depending on where, what kind of startup or company you're working at. And then the last thought is, now we need the designers. Now we have set up all of these processes, and now we need to add someone where the ratio is just not fair, and the expectations are higher, not only from a business side, but also from ourselves. Again, we're also this beautiful idea that we do user experience, we own this path, when the reality is that if you're one in thousands in the company, or even one in a 40 people company, the odds are that you don't own that journey, you don't own that research, you're just one more tool there. So the question is, what can we do about it? And now let's just spend 1 second thinking about Agile. And again, I'm actually really enjoy working with Agile. I think it's a great way to put the product designer together with developers, together with the PM, this new way of calling a designer a product designer. It pushes you not only to push systems, because depending also on the maturity level of your company, you might not be even building that much new UI anymore. You might be using a design system or certain component library that does make life a little bit easier, but it also pushes you to understand a little bit the strategy while understanding the constraints of the technology. But what happens is that most of us still work on a 2-week. And that means certainly you have to talk to people, because that's expected from a designer. You have to do user interviews, you have to do usabilities. You have then come up with a solution in 2 weeks, because developers are waiting and you don't want to be the bottleneck. And then also figure out how you're going to share this information with the developers, because it's not like we wrap up a research study or that we wrap up a prototype. There are so many things that happen after that. We need to review the specs, we need to review the components, we need to follow up with the developers, because depending again on your company and on your team, they might be starting development later, not at the moment that you're finished. So you have to be able to jump into different topics at the same time, and that's just exhausting for anyone. So what happens is that the thing that dies at the very beginning is research. That's the thing that we decide we just don't have enough time. We just cannot do it anymore, because we have so many things to deliver. And by consequence, innovation dies, because we also just don't have the energy to take a look at what happens after we're done with this feature. What is the longer term strategy? And again, that's completely understandable, because we need to remember that Agile was not built for designers. We're still learning how we're incorporating design within a process that is purely streamed by development. But we're getting there. It's not all bad. Also, a friendly reminder, and what happens with many companies when they hire their designer is that usability tests. Let's hire a designer so that they can talk to customers and they can just do thousands of usability tests and validate our assumptions. And that's the danger. Yes, a usability test is extremely useful, but the usability test is also just part of what research actually can offer. It's one type of study. We need to be really careful when the company is expecting that you'll run thousands of usability tests as a product designer, because first of all, is it bias? Do they want to prove something that they have in mind? And that's also a danger. Like, research is there not only to say like, you were right, good job, but it's really about sparking that moment of like, hey, did you notice this? Hey, we should probably follow up on this particular issue. And as a designer, we also have a tendency to fall in love with our ideas. So also being able to separate ourselves to our work when we're doing the usability test, when we're doing interviews, it's quite complicated, because again, you have 2 weeks to make a decision. So of course, by after the first one or second interview, you're already coming up with thousands of solutions and what the actual result is it's going to be when you haven't even finished a proper study. So a little bit about Marley Spoon and how I started. When I actually joined Marley Spoon, one of the goals for me was we need to build a research track. We back then had one product designer and a second product designer who just joined the company a couple of months before. And they did some usability tests. We were about to release a big release, a new design for the mobile app, but we just didn't have time to even follow up on that. So for me was, I want to build a research team because we cannot do it, because we just don't have time. And when I talk about paths, it usually looks like this. Oh, okay, you go over here and then research go over that, and then we meet in the finish line. Reality is it's way more complex than that. And when building the team and selling this idea to the organization was, yes, it has two different profiles. It's two different things, but they're so intertwined between each other that we have to touch base with product. We have to touch base with the product designers. We have to touch base with so many things that it's not that one is going into one direction and the other one is going completely opposite. We meet always in the middle. We meet sometimes like, I don't know, from one point to another, and we still scream at each other like, oh, something is coming, be prepared. And that's the beauty of the research and product design paths. So one of the things that, again, was really important for me is making the difference between what the product designer is actually doing and what the research path is all about. And first of all, one thing that gets lost in smaller teams it is the research ops. And again, you have 2 weeks to do basically everything. And then we don't consider all of those stuff of, well, what about consent forms? Have we sent enough mails for the customers? Are we tracking a database of all of the customers that we interview? Can we identify those customers or participants that are actually going to bring value that we can contact ad hoc to get real responses? What is the difference actually on getting random participants that just for the sake of we need to do it as fast as possible, so we're just going to launch, I don't know, a campaign on Facebook and see how many people we get, versus we know exactly what we're looking for, we got the right participant. And this takes time. It can take weeks if you don't have it in place. Another thing that gets lost in the 2-week sprint is the analysis and synthesis. How much time do you spend analyzing, watching the videos, doing a proper synthesis after being done with your project? To be honest, I personally spent 1 day on it. I was also in the whole hype of design sprints, and you have also 1 week to deliver all of the information. So every time that I was in an interview, I will just write my stickies, prepare them, have 1 hour to cluster them together, take a picture, and then I was ready to create a document and presenting my findings because I didn't have time. But reality is we record those interviews because we need to take a look at them again. We need to uncover those things that we didn't notice because we were moderating, because we were asking, because we didn't have time to take notes in that particular moment. We need to go back and actually start creating also patterns on like, hey, this person mentioned this, and I know this is happening. This might be really useful for the next research project. This might be really useful for a different feature. This is something that keeps coming up in different studies. Okay, we have the information. Let's compare it to actual data. What do we have? What are the numbers are telling us? Because again, data, and especially data-driven environments, can tell us a lot about the what. What is the customer doing? What is happening? Where the customer is having a problem. But only the qualitative data is actually going to take us to that why. Why is this happening? And spark that curiosity, spark that moment of like, hey, I have an idea. Should we take a look at this? And then the last thing that I really wanted to make sure to bring to the company is the discovery. Most of us are actually working on a reactive status. And this is actually a matrix that we built together with the research team to track what kind of task we were able to do versus the kind of task that we actually had time and effort to place. And if you take a look, you usually are working on down-to-earth topics, so really tactical and really reactive. There is one team that is like, we need to test this particular feature, and then you're already like, okay, I'm already running late. Let me see. Okay, all done. Good. Understandable. But actually, what we're trying to achieve in the team is also spend some time looking at this science fiction world, at the what if we go into this different direction, and what if also we're driving this initiative. It's not starting from just like, hey, we have a feature and now you're running late and we need information on this, but let's just interview customers. We don't need to show them a prototype. We don't need to show them the actual website. Let's just have a conversation. In our case, we're really lucky that most of our conversations are about food. So that's a great way to start a conversation, although you get quite hungry. But it really inspires you to just understand how, again, in our case, how people cook. What is the relationship that they have with food? Does it come from a cultural background, how you grew up? I mean, food is so emotional. You make decisions even on a daily basis. If you're tired, you don't cook the same things as when you have a lot of energy, than when you're sad and you want comfort food. So for us, having the opportunity to stay in this science fiction world while being proactive is extremely important. What is part of the strategy is to start putting those stickies down to the down to earth. So, okay, it started as a everything can happen project, but now we understand what are the steps that we need to take. We understand the activities that the teams need to take in order to accomplish this. And now it turns into a down to earth, more tactical approach. So those are basically the two places where we want to be as a research team. If it's in the world of science fiction and we're not driving this particular topic, then for us, it's not a priority. Then we also know that it's a nice idea, but we don't have ownership. And that's also okay. Sometimes we're in the driver's seat. Sometimes someone else is driving the research project. But then there is not much that we can control. And then we, again, push our priorities towards everything that we can proactively do and that is quite tactical or can inspire discovery. And again, one important thing to consider for the research and product task is that you don't want to be, as a product designer, always being told like, okay, this is what you want to do. And that's also a big mistake for people when you're trying to decide, like, should I go more on research or should I continue on the product design path, where you feel like, okay, now I have this person and they think they know it all and they're just going to tell me what to do. You actually, as a researcher, want to build a culture where, hey, we're all building this together. I facilitate information to you, but at the end of the day, and also depends on how your company is being established and your team works, the team makes the decision. That's also one of the beauties of agile, because I've been criticizing agile quite a lot, but one of the beauties is that you have autonomous teams. You have a team that understands the product, understands the features. You have the tech knowledge, you have the business knowledge, you have the product knowledge, and you can make a decision. So it's more about, hey, it's not like, here you go, but it's, let's take a look together. We can explain you a little bit further. We can help you find those patterns in the qualitative data where you can get a lot lost. And you also have an ally that is not as biased as you could be, because when you work in a product team, you're in this world where you know too much about a particular topic. So it can be really hard to take that step back and say, like, you know what, I didn't think about it, or yeah, these thoughts that I had about priorities doesn't make any sense anymore. So taking a look at the product designer profiles that we built, we're thinking about system thinking. You need to be able to look at upcoming patterns. You need to be able to see how what you're building lives in a whole complex ecosystem. You need to be pragmatic. And this is a hard thing to manage in a product team, because you need to have the ability to balance, okay, when do I make a quick decision and when I do believe we need to do further research? Because having a research team can have the danger that everything goes through testing, everything goes through analysis, and sometimes we're over designing, over analyzing a particular feature. So having a pragmatic way of thinking and deciding, you know what, this can work is extremely valuable for a product designer. The attention to detail. Yes, you will still be working with Figma. You will still move pixels around. So in our case, for Marley Design, the attention to detail is extremely important. You're still in charge of the quality that we're delivering to the customers. You still need to be able to communicate feedback to the developers and make sure that the UI that we're presenting makes sense. And collaboration. Again, for us at Marley Spoon, tech, design, and product come together. The Scrum team is the basis of how we're building the tribes. And that's the power that they get of this autonomy, is this collaboration of the three expertise. On the other side, we have the researcher. And for us, what is extremely important is you have to be analytical thinking. You have to be able to, again, see all of the information, be able to compare it to the quantitative data that we can offer, be able to reach out to people who might have information that can make your study way more valuable than before. You have to be organized. And this is something that I personally, as a product designer, struggle quite a bit, but it's extremely important for a researcher, because you need to keep track on documents that you're sending to customers. Do you have all of the concern forms? What kind of mails are you sending? How do you set up that mail? Because hello, GDPR, it is a big deal. And sometimes on the rush of trying to get things done, we forget a lot about these little issues that are part of the research and that need to be considered in advance when planning any type of research activity. You need to have great communication skills. Being able to share with the company complex topics is extremely important. When do you overshare? When do you share enough? When do you just share UI issues? How do you document this information? It's part of these communication skills. And the one that I consider the most important is the open-mindedness. And what does it mean? You need to go into a study, be willing to get rid of your initial idea. You need to be able to say like, hey, I mean, we all have biases, but try to be as open-minded on like what I consider was a great, it can be killed. So you need to be able to kill all of your darlings and say like, hey, we can rescue if, I mean, this is the thing. For a product designer, it can be quite stressful on like, was it successful or not? And on a research path, it goes more into, well, it's not about success or not, it's actually what are we learning? Even if a particular flow fails or we discover that it needs improvement, that's an action point. We know what to do and we know where we need to invest our times. So going into these activities with an open mind and knowing that everything can change and everything can happen, it's an extremely good skill for any researcher out there. Similar to the product designer, we push our research team to be close to the customer service and to the data team. These are the teams where they need to collaborate the most. We need data. We do need those numbers. We do need quantitative data. It will be unprofessional for me to say that, hey, just qualitative, interview 20 customers and that's enough. No, we need to be able to do and connect those findings into data. That's why finding your ally in the data team or in a BI team is extremely, extremely important for the success of a research team, especially if the research team is quite small. And customer service, the same. Customer service usually have this feeling that they need to solve all of the problems from the customers immediately. And that's completely fair. That's their job. But the value that you can get from those conversations from the customer service team is extremely important, because it will also spark more inspiration. It will also guide you to, okay, where do we put the effort and where do we see the priorities? And now, let's be honest. As product designers, especially when you're joining this beautiful world of UX, we believe that we need to do it all, that we need to be experts on UI, that we need to be experts in strategy, that we need to do all of the interviews. But the reality is that, first of all, we're not good at everything. And second, it's okay to say that you don't like something. And that's also the beauty of growing up in a company, on deciding what your career step is, on deciding like, do I want to go over here or over there? We don't have to like everything. I personally love research. It's something that I've always enjoyed, and I always put it in my work. But I've also realized that I don't like moderation. I can do it, but it stresses me up. The same could be for someone more on the research side, where they could say, you know what, I don't know how to build a design system. And that's also fair. It can be, I don't know how to do it, I don't like to do it. And these are honest questions that we need to ask ourselves. What do I enjoy doing? Where do I see my strengths? How can I use my time better when deciding, should I be more of a product designer? Should I go more into research? And this is an activity that I did early on with a team. And this is also an activity that I personally been doing every time that I need to take a decision on where do I want to take my career path. And basically what you have here is identifying first your strengths. We need to be really honest with each other and say, you know what, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at UI. I'm really good at identifying stakeholders. I can make things happen. I work quite fast. And then that will drive you into the second column, which is more of and less of. Again, being really honest, you need to think about the ecosystem that you're working in. What do you want more of? Okay, you can be really good at UI, and you know that this is one of your strengths, but also you want actually more strategy. You want to be able to be part of those conversations with product managers, which means that maybe that means less of moving pixels around. And that's fair. Your strengths doesn't always have to link completely on like, okay, I'm really good at UI, so I will be always the best UI designer. No, fair. You don't have to. It's good to identify them, because then once you realize, I want more of this and less on this, you can figure out what are the things you need to work on. It's cool. If you're going into, I don't know, a strategy, most likely if you identify like, well, one of my strengths is not really communication, probably I should learn how to share my thoughts. Probably I should write a little bit more because I want to get out there. And it's good, then you know, this is something that I can try. And you can always go back at it. As an example, I personally been doing everything, a little bit of everything. At some point I was like, hey, I'm really good at UI, so I want to get into design system. It's all over the place. I want to get to know it. I'm going to be really good at it because I understand how everything works. At some point, I actually realized, okay, cool, design system, nice. I just don't like it enough. So for me, that was also a really important turning point into my career on realizing, you know what, it's okay. I'm really good at UI. I can use my strength in UI by giving feedback to my team. I just don't have to do it anymore. I want less of this and I want more strategy. So what does it mean? It means that I need to get better at business. I need to get better at reading numbers. I need to get better at communicating with not only developers, but marketing teams, understanding, in my case, with Marley Spoon, how fulfillment centers work, how different markets are working, so that actually what I want the most of, it's actually bringing me value, and it's bringing value to the company. So you can consider it as more of, those are the things that spark you join, and that you just want to do more, and less of, these are the things that it's okay if I don't have to do it quite often. It's okay if I do moderation. I can do it, no problem. I just want to move towards a different way. Or as a product designer, I actually do want to build the product. I want to be more into the future. Fair enough, I want to do less of the research. Fair. That's why we have the two different paths on the site. And again, it's flexible enough if one day you say, like, you know what, I do want to test or try doing a little bit more research. Cool. It comes with this package of things and analysis and operations and readout, and try it and see if it likes you. If not, you can still always go back to the product world with all of these profiles that we already discussed. And then you will realize that you will start noticing what your actual strengths are. And it just makes everything easier, because you will find your allies. You then realize that you don't have to be this superhero, this superhuman designer that can do it all, because you can delegate. And that's one of the most important things for any product designer or researcher out there trying to do these different paths, is you don't have to do it alone. Just delegate. Fine. If you don't have a researcher in the team, okay, how can you divide research activities? You have your PM who should be aware of research, who can give you data. You can go directly to the data. You can get the marketing team. You can get like so many people to provide you with the information that you need, but that maybe you don't enjoy that much doing. The same for UI, the same for anything else. If you're more on the research path and you need to do something as a product designers for support on prototypes, get a couple of components, because at least, for example, at Marley Spoon, it is not mandatory for the research team to be experts on the science system or even understand how Figma works. It's a good to have, good, but what we're driving to is the quality on the research. It's okay. I don't expect you to build something out of nowhere. We can support you, giving you a couple of components for you to build and share your idea. But that's the most important thing. Like, think about what makes you happy and think about the strengths. The biggest difference, again, between research and the product is the product designer will work in a Scrum team, at least at Marley Spoon. While the researcher, we have a little bit more of a open schedule. So basically what we do at Marley Spoon is we have also a catch-up bi-weekly. So similar to the Scrum teams, we also do a check-in on all of the topics that we're looking for. But the topics are so different that scheduling in a bi-weekly basis help us to keep track of all of the topics. So we have studies that are running for 3 weeks. We have studies that are unmoderated, so are behind us, but you still need to do a lot of operations. We have topics that are only one particular week. So we do a catch up quite often just to make sure like our priority is still in place. And that gives us, we're working a little bit on Kanban, an adapted version of Kanban, but that gives us the flexibility to say, hey, new priority, something is coming, okay, change. It's okay, can we stop this? Can we move this around? So we work a little bit more flexible to adapt to the needs of the team and to adapt to our own needs. Again, friendly reminder, having a research team doesn't mean that only the research team is going to do the job. Everybody who is in a product team should be doing research. One of our biggest goals is actually to decentralize research. Yes, right now we have a team. People know that they can rely on them providing feedback, but we also want to make sure that, for example, usability tests, this is a task for the Scrum team. You, as a product designer, are in charge of usability. You need to make sure that your UI makes sense, that is adaptive enough, that is flexible enough, that it has enough contrast, that it just makes sense. So the Scrum teams are in charge of having usability tests. If they request more support from research, again, it's about working together. We made of a schedule, we support on scripts, we support on planning, but they have to be involved in every step of the way because we don't do it alone. So how is it going for us at Marley Spoon? Because this all sounds really nice, but it's way more challenging than that. So here you can see a little bit on how we actually prepare on the different quarters. We actually started officially with the research team in January 2021. So it's almost a year of activities. So we focus the first quarter on processes because it's a completely new team. It's a completely new initiative for the company. We focus on tooling and we focusing on advocacy. What does it mean? We were going to almost every single meeting, just saying hi to everybody and telling them like, please involve us. We're super happy to support. You have a question? Do you want to know something? We're here. Nobody contacted us. It was extremely sad, and we kept doing that. And we were trying to figure out, okay, let's just do something. Let's test this for the sake of the team actually realizing what the value is. So we focused the first 3 months on just selling the idea to every single team, like we're here and we're ready to support you. On Q2, we continue with processes. We learned a lot on the first 3 months, but now it was more about actually make them work. We work on the collaboration. Advocacy was not enough. Us going to meetings and saying, yay, we are here was obviously not working out. So we switch to, okay, we're going to all of your meetings and we're going to collaborate together, and you're going to see it in the first hand how we can bring value to your decisions. We also did our first readout. So it was the first time that we were testing how do we share the insights that we gather, how do we share all of this information with the team, with the department, with the company. And we got a lot of feedback on that. Then Q3 was all about processes again, because there's so many decisions that you need to make. But by Q3, we already had at least 20 different email templates that anybody could use, where you only have to be able to change the name and easily send a mail to our customers. We also have all of our forms. We also had access. We used to rely on other teams to get our participants' names. We now have 3 different agencies that we work with, and we also can personally contact our own customer base, which makes everything way easier because we have more control of the process. We did a new version of the readout. We figured out that we were so excited to share all of the knowledge that we had that the readout was just too complex for people actually to grasp. So we divided the readout into different sections. We made it more accessible to people. We share information beforehand, and we're waiting for the feedback on our new ways of doing readout. And one thing that was extremely important was results. Now we're finally in the stage where we're wrapping up many of the tests that we started in Q2. And now it's all about showing the value and the impact. And lastly, one thing that we moved actually to Q4 was the decentralization of research. How can we support any product designer into running their own research as easy and as fast as possible? So we're also doing a lot of unmoderated testing, where the driver of this whole project is actually the product designer, as they need to prepare the flows, as they need to prepare a lot of the thinking behind it. We support more on like, okay, how do you write the hypotheses? We can support on analyzing the data so that they don't have also that bias on them building the product and so on. We are also for Q4 focusing on the team 2.0, which means we are just onboarding more researchers this quarter, which makes a big and exciting challenge. And for the first time, we are now not begging people to come to us. We're actually expanding out of the first tribe that we have. So we were working only with customer-facing products, but now we're expanding to the culinary team. We're expanding to internal tools. How do we get validation for the tools that we're building in-house? How do we get quicker feedback from stakeholders? So we're actually now having to reject a couple of requests because we're just not enough. But it was just actually the result of basically 3 quarters trying to show people the value that research can bring into an agile organization. To be more transparent, what it means in terms of numbers is that in 2020, we did 2 usability tests and 6 customer interviews. Today, to September, we actually managed in less than 1 year to have 5 usability tests, 1 direct study, 50 customer interviews, 1.5 unmoderated tests, and a half because the first was a test on actually trying to figure out, does it make sense to do it like this, and trying to understand the tool. We had 5 different insights workshops with different teams, and we're also currently running 3 different ABC tests as we just implemented our new ABC tool for faster iteration. What's next for us as a team? We're hoping, if everything works well, to introduce a 3rd path into our beautiful experience team, which is the strategy one. And they will also be working closely with product designers and research designers. But what we want to achieve is to have someone looking at longer term projects, not the things that we can accomplish in 1 quarter, because right now for research, our goal is we want to be a quarter ahead so that we feed the insights to the teams, and they, by the time they start planning Q4, they truly understand where the customer pain point is, where can we bring most value. But for the strategy plan path, what we're planning is to be even ahead of that. We want to start looking as a starting point 6 months ahead, really thinking about all of those bigger ideas that we just don't have the time to focus, to really start exploring them, building a case study around it. We're considering, obviously, for this particular track, not only product designers and researchers, but also adding a proper PM that can drive the business side of it. But that's kind of on the planning for 2022. Let's see if we actually get over there. And yeah, I think as a final thought from my side is we need to get away and thinking that we have to do it all, that we have to build it. There is a lot of value on actually creating a different path, on supporting the product designers, on supporting the tech team, on supporting the product paths. It's about understanding your strengths. It's about understanding where you want to go and where you can bring a lot of value, and having enough time to properly spend time on your expertise, whatever it is product design or research, is what actually going to bring value to the company. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for talking with us today. And yeah, awesome. Yeah, this was, I mean, the presentation was so wonderful. I mean, your illustrations was so like captivating and engaging the whole time, as well as the information that you're providing for us. I just want to say thank you up front for spending this time with us. I'm just going to do a quick reminder. There's a bunch of questions in Slido, but if you're still wondering, you can upvote them or put in your other ones. We have a couple minutes. I'm going to try to get to them as fastly as possible. So we had a couple questions in a variety of different areas, but one of the ones I see coming up a lot is about like, how do you incorporate data or quantitative data into your research process? Because you talk about this in the beginning, and I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit more about how you're working with other maybe departments, other people in your team to bring in with the more maybe qualitative work that you're doing.
Yeah, so we rely quite a lot with the BI teams and with the data team. So what we do is we have access to Looker. That's a great way to start and also explore. It can be quite challenging for a lot of people because it's quite confusing, but a good advice is just ask people, like play with it, try to understand it, but go with the data people and say like, hey, am I interpreting this graph the right way? And then they can like explain you how to do it. So the next time that you look it up for yourself, you understand how it was displayed, how the data was gathered. And that's the easiest way to actually connect the information to your qualitative data. Another thing that we do quite often, to be honest, because we are not the experts on quantitative data, and that's also fair. We don't want to be, because we have the teams for that. So we usually partner a lot with customer service, where we go in like, hey, we're taking a look at, I don't know, favorites. Can you look in how many customers have they complain or mention this particular word, and in a week or two they come up with a whole report on like, hey, we have X amount of people from X market saying that they're missing the favorites. So that already helps us. And again, it's all about like, you don't have to do it. You can go to the particular team and just request it and sit down with them and try to understand it, so that your readout with qualitative information makes more sense, especially for those who are more focusing on the data.
Yeah. And just to clarify, we did have actually a question in the chat about what a readout is exactly. So do you mind expanding on that? We were talking a little bit about this before.
Yeah, so a readout is basically the presentation of your findings. That's the definition that we give it at Marley Spoon, is where we collect like, hey, all of the information that we just have in this particular analysis, this is our documentation, and we're going to read it out to you so that you understand where is this coming from. It's basically this living document. Right now we're working, what we do is we do a workshop first before delivering the final readout with action points, recommendations, and further thinking and findings, because at the end of the day, it is a big recommendation deck. So that's basically the readout.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking, it's a one way that you guys are using to communicate what's happening to the larger community at your company, of what's happening and that kind of top insights that you're finding as well, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And another question we had was, I think this was based off of that matrix that you had in the beginning, where you're talking about proactive and reactive approaches. And so I was wondering if you could kind of expand a little bit about and tell us more about what are your reactive or proactive approaches and how you're kind of defining those.
Yeah, so reactive is basically someone came to us and told us like, we need this like yesterday. And then we're already reacting on like, okay, let's see, can we do a usability test? Yes, no, not enough time. Okay, so then that means that we go into moderation, unmoderated, and then we're just reacting to the situation, which happens quite often. On the proactive one, we already saw like, this team is planning this. So we approach them before they reach out to like, hey, I saw that your roadmap is looking like this. Let's start the conversation. We have a couple of ideas, because that basically buys us time to properly choose the kind of study that we want to run. Not always we're in the proactive side, fair. Now we also have the process on like, okay, if random topic comes out and we need to give information, this is what we do. And we also can be as transparent as possible to the team to say, hey, okay, this was unexpected. We can deliver in 2 weeks. Because also it's about transparency. If we cannot do it, we cannot do it. And that's also fair for the team that we're building. For me, it's about the quality. And no, I don't want to give up that quality just because we have to deliver in 1 day. If that would be the case, then we would still be doing the product designer can do it all. But we always try to adapt and be as flexible as possible.
Yeah. And it sounds like throughout at least this year that you have actually been able to move more towards the proactive side of reacting to these problems and issues within the company as well, or like the user needs and stuff. Do you feel that you're being able to do that through the shifts and changes over the past year?
Yeah, definitely. Slowly, as I said at the beginning, we were begging for like, hey, come to us. We want to support the Scrum teams, because the original plan, at least from the CPO, was like, we do more usability tests, which fair, you have to start somewhere. But by Q3, we realized, we're still doing a lot of reactive. This is not enough. The issue was way earlier. So let's start like looking ahead. We can already start preparing all of the study, and it can be in parallel. We don't want to stop development. So it's not like, oh, we cannot build this because we don't have the information. It's like, okay, there are many ways on how we can build the skeleton of it. And then do we have questions about wording? Do we have questions about this? These are all things that we can actually change without stopping development. So that way of thinking has allowed us to actually move forward. At least right now, we're like 2 sprints ahead. We're hoping that this quarter we reach being 1 quarter ahead of the whole team.
Yeah. I think that has to be super difficult, and it's like a cultural change that also has to happen within the company too. So it's slow moving and little pieces that end up building in the end, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. It is a switch. I mean, usually a lot of people come from the thinking of we need more usability tests. And very well, also one thing that we implemented was we have so many new joiners, and one of the benefits of working at Marley Spoon is you get boxes for free. So you turn into a customer as well. So we also started introducing usability tests with the new joiners, which is a great way to test things. However, a warning is that if you're testing with your own people, you do have a bias. You know the product way more than normal customers. You also have most likely people who are working in tech and who are a little bit more familiar with a couple of things. So what we're doing with new joiners is we test upcoming studies. So that's also was one of the learnings. Like there's so many things that can go wrong during a study or while you're testing a new prototype, and you don't want to fail with the customer or the participant, because that's going to cost you money. So now we are basically using our newcomers as part of like, hey, we're about to launch a study. Can you do it first? And we do the whole session. We do the whole moderation. We use the script that we're going to use with participants. We record the session so that we can also follow up, because we can learn a lot of the things, but it's more about us testing the upcoming study that we're going to launch, so that we're prepared on like, hey, the prototype didn't work. There was a problem with the script. We spend way more time than we expected on a particular question, so that we can adapt before actually starting the study. Because once you start the study, it is not recommended to make any changes on the script or make any changes on the questions, because you're going to have different kinds of results, and it's going to be harder to really analyze and find those patterns in the study.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you're experimenting on your research types and techniques, like before you're putting them out there into the actually using them with outside users instead of internal users, which I love that idea as well. I'm looking at the time and we're a little bit over, so I just want to kind of wrap things up. I want to say thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or is there a way people can get in touch with you if they have some more questions? We had a lot of questions in the chat as well that we weren't able to address.
Yeah, I'm more happy that to address them like later on, and also feel free to add me on LinkedIn. More than happy to follow up on the topic. Especially if you're a solo designer or you're a lead designer trying to figure out how to come up with this. It's a topic that it's right now one of my priorities, and I love talking about it. So yeah, more than happy to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering that and for speaking with us today.